You're listening to The Frankie Files, FrankieFilesPodcast.com. Today my guest is Tabitha Chapman, a marriage and family therapist and clinical counselor. As a therapist, her priority is to encourage her clients to rediscover their own inner perfection and help them trust their own truths. Tabitha is focusing her career on helping parents improve their relationships with their children, as well as helping people restore or rebuild strong attachments to themselves as they heal trauma from coercion. As the founder of the Freedom Train Project, FTP, a nonprofit 501c3 advocacy agency, Tabby provides services for people wishing to leave cults or coercive relationships. How cool is that? Tabby is on the American Association of Doctors of Behavioral Health as the Director of Mental Health Education and Treasurer, as well as serving as a senior trainer with Gray's Trauma Informed Care. Additionally, she spends time with children on a weekly basis as a leader in outdoor education with Tinkergarten. The most important lesson Tabby derived from her own life experiences is to let go of trying to exert control over others in all areas of life. Great advice. Welcome, Tabitha.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm thrilled to be here.
You were involved in the International Cult Awareness Month of August. How did it start? Who started it? And what year did it start?
This was the inaugural year, actually. This is my baby. So basically, as I had come out as being a member of NXIVM, I guess you can call it that, or an ex-member of NXIVM, I noticed, like, on the internet, and I guess also I was in Seduced and the documentary, kind of reading, people's responses to the film and just being more vocal on the internet. I just noticed there was a lot of uneducated, if not downright harmful statements that were made about victims of cults. Mm-hmm. And so as time went on, I would be speaking to academics. I'm currently getting a doctorate's degree in forensic psychology, public policy, and law. And just talking to other academics about what's missing in various industries. And one thing that came up was, almost other types of major, victimization areas like domestic violence and trafficking. Mm-hmm. They have these awareness months. And so it's this month where there's like blitzes of information that come out. Well, we need something like that, So I actually, worked on planning it for a good 4 months. I submitted it even to, one of those like calendars where you can go and track the, monthly. And then I started to let a few people know at a time, a few organizations and stuff like, with the idea that this would be a pilot year, just try to get it out there that we are even doing it, with the goal of next year being the big push. International Cult Awareness. And I left it blank. I mean, I left it just International Cult Awareness instead of an Awareness Month because I wanted to be able to put out information all year long.
InternationalCultAwareness.org.
So what ended up happening in my life is sadly, my mother suddenly passed away. And so I had to put everything on pause mid-August. And, and be there for my mom's transition and then help with the funeral planning and everything. And so I only got to experience, I would say about almost 2 weeks of this myself. Thankfully, other people continue to post.
Just want to say my condolences.
Thank you.
On so much going on. That must have been rough.
It was so surprising. And my mom, is however you want to view it, right, is my best friend, and so it was probably the hardest thing I've had to do. So,
well, my hugs to you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, you spoke about the various weeks, and that was what attracted me. There was 5 weeks in the month of August, so there was 5 weeks of action. Each of them were different. Can we break that down?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
Well, our first week was essentially cult basics and interventions. And if you look at any sort of awareness month content out there, most of the time the whole month ends up being that like domestic violence 101 or human trafficking 101, the basics of each of those things. Whereas International Cult Awareness, I wanted to spend a lot of time on those basics of information, but then also dive in a little bit deeper, because while we can say via academic studies that the majority of the people who join cults are because they're in a transition in their life, a cult has a different pull to it. It has a different type of transition one might be into or one might be experiencing. So I thought it was important to break it down. Plus, what is one of the first things that you think of when you think of the word cults, right? You think religious cult.
That's right.
You know, depending on what generation you're in, you might think of Heaven's Gate or something like that. So I wanted to also hit the religious cults first, if you will, which is week 2. And kind of get that out of the way, because, yeah, we all know about religious cults. But then I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into cults in which we actually might find ourselves into, because one of the biggest statements on the internet was, oh, I would never join a cult. I would never be that stupid.
I think all survivors are familiar with that line.
Exactly. Week 3, we start right into the political and race-based cults, which is one of the biggest situations happening right now. So I started with that one because I wanted people to look around them, you know, like, wait a second.
You say political and race-based. So that would be such as KKK or Black Power, or are you saying that cults that are political and race-based?
No, just those are just examples. It can be political and race-based. Democratic Workers' Party, I believe that was the cult that my friend, Dr. Lolich, I love her, our most recent type of cult, you know, that we're kind of being exposed to all the time right now. KKK is not gone. It is still here and it is still running. And there's even smaller cults like political or race-based cults that might form on college campuses, which happens quite a bit. And at first you don't think it's a cult. It's just a group of people meeting together with the same beliefs. But then one rises above the rest, and then it becomes a little bit crazier than you really thought you were getting into, you know? So.
And Tabby, that's the thing for me that I've really been, since I started trying to understand what happened to me, realizing the recruitment technique's pretty important. It's like the ideology is what they use to recruit us. So it has to be pretty and shiny like candy to get people's attention. And then, as you know, it can be modified as they go. But you also mentioned a couple that it was interesting. I think it was on the 5th week. Large group awareness training and one-on-one cults. Can you mention some stuff about that?
Yes, and these are actually really important and the one-on-one is not talked about as much, but let's start with, that's week 4, large group awareness. Large group awareness idea of NXIVM would be considered a large group awareness. That's the one that I was part of, which I'll talk about more later. Forum, Landmark, those are considered large group awareness. So they basically, large groups of people come and they have seminars and their trainings.
Okay.
Those are most often, you know, or even Tony Robbins, for instance, F is ran is a large group awareness training. CMA, I am not stating that specifically his is a cult, but that idea, that charismatic leader leading a large amount of people. So Tony Robbins would be that example. And they're everywhere. I mean, the personal or life coach movement has taken over everything by storm. Probably one of the most unethical communities out there, because there is no true oversight board. Certifications or licenses that are designed like overarching, you know, that like granted at a state level or a federal level. Because essentially life coaches are frequently doing unlicensed therapy work with people, which I know is a big deal, and people are lobbying to try to get that changed, but it's hard to get our reins around them, you know. One-on-one cults, because it is probably the most ignored and the most harmful. One-on-one cult is, you know, I have a mentor, I have a guru, I have someone who I talk to on a regular basis, and you know, if that becomes in any way coercive, because like if they start to give you, say, statements that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, like gurus and mentors are a real big deal, right? Things that is like, oh, well, obviously you don't love yourself enough if you're not willing to do this. Really question it. If it starts to feel you start to feel a little tug in your heart that says like, oh, that's kind of weird. Why would they say that? Question it, okay? Because it's very important in this sense. A lot of people are doing the one-on-one based stuff, and it's easier because there are other people who be like, hey, do you think it's weird that they said that? You know, like,
it seems like they do a lot of, recruitment for self-improvement.
Yeah, every kind of improvement. It could be any kind of call now for a one-on-one coach call, anything like that, and trust your inner voice. That is the biggest thing. Trust that inner voice. And if it says, hey, something's wrong, try your best not to be like, oh, no, I'm just.
The fear of missing out can be one of those things that gets us to listen to gurus who lead us astray. If you don't listen to this broadcast now, you won't hear the secrets of the universe. I heard one, God, there's so much junk out here now. YouTube, if you see the numbers 1111, 111 repeating, you are in a spiritual awakening. You're listening to The Frankie Files, FrankieFilesPodcast.com. I really appreciate survivors like yourself taking the pain and trying to turn it around and talk to the public and say, look, it's not just stupid people who get into cults, self-improvement groups, education that turns wrong. It's a fine line between learning and being in a religious cult or a self-improvement cult. And you survived that, Tabitha, so applause to you.
One quick thing, I want to go back to the Awareness Month. Anyone wants to become involved, there's a forum on my website, and we can work on it as a whole committee, because this time it was mostly just me. I'd love to form a whole committee that comes together monthly next year. TabbyChapman.com. Having an experience as a personal coach through NXIVM, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because I was an apprentice coach.
Could you tell us how you were recruited and how you worked your way up through the ranks? What attracted you to start with?
So I wouldn't say that I was attracted to start with in that sense, but it was a requirement for me to be able to work with the person who recruited me. Some people may or may not have heard of Allison Mack, who was my...
She's in jail.
So she actually recruited me. She emailed me and asked me to work on her official site with her. I had been running a fan site for her. And so then when I went to go meet her in Vancouver to talk about the proposition, if you will, she stated that in order for her to hire me, I'd have to take these seminars. Yeah, so that's how that started. So I agreed after much deliberation with my partner at the time. So Allison had presented it this way to me. Some people are calling it a cult. So I want you to Google it.
She did, huh?
She said that to me. But, I've been to it, and I haven't seen anything weird. And it's all up and up, and, it's changed my life. And I just want my whole team to take it so that I know that I'm working with an ethical group of people. And so, of course, I went and looked it up because, why not? But I just kept remembering the whole time, because at the time there was like a Forbes article about it.
What year?
Maybe 2006 is when I had the initial conversation.
This is fascinating stuff. So you're recruited by one of the leaders directly.
As I was doing my research, or whatever you call that at the time, I just kept remembering Allison saying, everything is fine, it's all on the up and up. And so I kind of took her personal testimony over anything else, because she was there. That's just sort of how my brain was at the time. And I joined NXIVM. I did the first intensive in, I think it was August 2007. Here in Los Angeles. Couldn't afford anything like that at the time. I was just out of college with my bachelor's in computer science. And you have to take like a whole week off. And there we only got like 2 weeks of vacation max, And
would she pay for this for you?
No, she required me to pay for it. She agreed to do like a work exchange. So she paid for it, and then I worked for free for a period of time. So that's how it started. Moving over to Vancouver to be, to work more directly with her in person, because she was still working with Smallville, and then also to continue being part of the program as well. So It's an ongoing thing. So if there were times when I was like, I don't want to be part of the program, then she would suddenly start talking about hiring someone else. a regular situation going on there.
Well, what's yes, ma'am, that she would use such coercive, threatening tactics so early.
Mm-hmm.
That stands out to me personally.
There was some enticing too on the other way around, in the sense that, like, if I showed what NXIVM calls inner deficiencies. So if I showed any kind of, you can't see my air quotes, but it would be a clear evidence of inner deficiencies, right? Something that's obviously we don't feel as whole about ourselves. So I would essentially, if I missed a deadline or anything like that, oh, it's your inner deficiency. Let's figure out what's wrong so you can fix it, right? So there were some conversations that I would have, like growing up in poverty or growing up, just various aspects of my life that would come up, and then, this group can help with that, or this, in the very initial conversation that we had about NXIVM, I'm not sure if Allison had been to a training yet, but I know for sure she had been to a gymnastics weekend, which is their women's group, their pre-DOS group. Right away on that weekend that I was there, she was driving me, and we were somewhere. We were talking about a really hot topic. Her response to the hot topic was, it's something that happens that's really terrible to people. She was like, oh, well, you don't have to view it as terrible. You can just make your mind go somewhere else and choose joy while these terrible things are happening to you. What in the world,
So train yourself to check out.
Yep, exactly. So that wasn't our first conversation before I even...
This is great story stuff. And this is in the first year.
So that was the first year that I knew her. And she wasn't my coach, but sometimes she would come talk to me and occasionally about, various things. They don't usually set your coach to be the person who enrolled you.
You have a unique psychological barter going on because your work and your living situation is tied up in your success with Allison Mack. When you work for her, having this tied up with that's had to be a lot of stress for you.
So the whole thing was stressful. I'm not gonna pull any punches. So the minute that Vancouver was nice. So Vancouver, the community in Vancouver was way different than the community in Albany. It felt like they were truly trying to be a community of people. There was all kinds of humanities events. We went hiking. We went there together, and it really did feel like the goal there was to be a community. And this is before it became a full center. And then I ended up moving to Albany, and that's where everything was horrific. Like it changed because by the time I moved to Albany, I got promoted to an apprentice coach. Now, one of the requirements is that you'll accept feedback anytime, anywhere, for any reason. Or version of abuse. And so I just got constant, quote, all of the time, anything that people don't like about you, can I give you some feedback?
But Dr. Lellish called it attack therapy that was formed in Synanon. That was a new revelation to me when it started, when this type of thing started. But that's what it is basically tearing each other down.
That was the roughest part for me because I experienced long lectures in my childhood and stuff like that. And it was very triggering for me.
When you're doing the homework, the programs that you were required to do for your job, so your employment's all wrapped up in this.
I actually have journals and journals and journals of my experience because that was one of the things that I did. They would never allow us to write or take notes or anything. So everything that I did write down was sort of from my memory and just my pure thought process of it. The basics thing that they did was have us evaluate words. And it seems so silly now, but have us evaluate words and what they mean to us. So the word love or the word responsibility or whatever, and kind of just really dig deep in, well, that's what they said, and try to figure it out. But really, it was just all so much more confusing by the time you got done evaluating a word, But essentially, I would come out at the end of the day more confused, more dissociated than I had when I started because it just gets really like a little tornado in your head for every time you start to do things. I had to write reports about how my mistake not only affected me, but my community and the whole world. Me showing up late to this meeting affected the whole world. You have to make something up because whatever you write has to be approved, and someone higher than you. And so otherwise you get sent back to rewrite it again. So
talking about very straightforward words and definitions. What is money? But what is it really?
But with money, they got things all kinds of confusing with money because they would pick certain people and let them do work exchange, or which now we've recognized as peony and labor trafficking, or they would pick people and like target people for like the $10,000 ethics training, and who knows why they picked the way that they picked, but like constant pick people to put them in that peony situation or labor trafficking situation. So you can't afford the $10,000 training? Well, obviously either the situation here is that you don't love yourself enough, to invest something into it, or maybe you could do a little bit of work exchange, right? So I guess work exchange is my option,
Okay, Scientology does this too, because when they signed the billion-year contract in various segments of their organization, if they leave, they're threatened with having to pay back all the training they received while they were doing that.
That's where you are if you're kind of one of those picked. And I say picked because there were some people that couldn't afford those extra trainings and they weren't being coerced into joining either. They would join when they could, so it wasn't like they were kicked out either. It was just there were certain people that were at every training. I was one of them for a while that was at most of the trainings. And I was at, the level 1 trainings a lot as a coach exchange. So I would be coaching the level 1 trainings. And again, feedback everywhere all of the time.
Sounds like the military. You go in and you're going to get psychologically broken down so we can do what we want.
The headquarters decided that I could work for them and work on their website. So I was one of the web developers, NXIVM.net and executive success programs and Rainbow Culture Gardens. And I worked on the World Ethical Foundations Consortium website. I started moving into working specifically for individuals like Claire Bronfman, Sarah Bronfman. I didn't really work directly with Nikki, but I helped her with her website stuff, or a version of Lauren Salzman's website I did. So I worked sort of for many of the people that were over there. Some people paid me directly, people paid me on exchange. And one person in particular who should not have been in this position, argued with me over 15 minutes of work because I was driving during the meeting and not sitting down at a desk. So one of the Bronfmans, I believe it was Sarah, but they called me up after I sent my invoice and said, "Weren't you driving during that meeting?" And I was like, "Yes." And I think I should only have to pay for 50% of that. I had been doing a little bit of freelance pre-NXIVM, and in that, we may give people discounts, as a, friendship discounts or something, or family discounts. We usually get paid, so, and even while I was working in NXIVM, I was still doing some outside projects, and the experience was 100% different, For people who were outside of NXIVM, I would send an invoice with a net 30 payment, and then within 30 days, they'd pay me. It was really nice. In NXIVM, I would send an invoice, and then I wouldn't hear from anyone. And then I would go ask, and they'd say, "Oh, you sent it to the wrong email. This goes to this email." Okay. So I'd send it to the right email, and then I wouldn't hear from anyone. And I would go, "Can you tell me what's wrong with what's going on?" "Oh, you put a wrong word on your invoice." "Oh, okay. Which word is wrong?" "I'm going to have you look over that and figure out which word is wrong." Okay. So then I would take it to my, supervisor. I'd be like, "They said there's a wrong word on here." And then they would help identify which word is wrong, right? It was because there was a specific company, I put Rainbow Culture Gardens or something, and they would say, "No, it needs to be World Ethical Foundations Consortium because they're the ones paying for it, and you can't mention Rainbow Culture Gardens on anything." It's weird, they called it inductive learning process. Wouldn't get paid for that invoice sometimes for a month. Meanwhile, I've already submitted 2 invoices that were clearly correct, and then I would get paid, but that one invoice is still...
It sounds like you stumbled on a bookkeeping secret. They were trying to hide some kind of money trail?
Yeah, it was something like that because they were having a nonprofit pay these fees of something that was only, beneficial to potentially 1 or 2, people instead of it being beneficial to the public at large. That was what the issue was.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com. We're at 07 and you're in
Albany at this time. So I didn't move to Albany till 08 in Vancouver, and then got the opportunity to move to Albany and work through my issues so much faster if I lived in Albany.
Through their issues of all the free work.
All of the ridiculous feedback. And they had promised me as well that I would be able to run my own a cappella group, which that was kind of the thing they were into at the time in Albany.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved music. My first, where I switched it in college was to be a choir director. And then I switched it because I couldn't handle music theory at 6:30 in the morning every day. So, yeah, I was in Albany from 2008, and then I left Albany in late 2011, almost 4 years there. But I continued being part of it here in California. Yeah, that's the word. I had some experiences where when I was in Albany, my big goal that I was working on was running a business. I was trying to get a web development. But that was my goal. I had a situation where Claire Bronfman had called me into her office, and she said that she had heard of an incident that occurred with me, and asked if I would take these paperworks and try to get this person arrested. So the incident that one of their main, enemies, if you will, blogger enemies, had come and stood about 10 feet away from me and stared at me for a good 20, 25 minutes. That man didn't say anything to me. He just stood there and stared at me. And it was very intimidating, and I was scared, but didn't think it really warranted arresting. Fast forward now that I have a doctorate's degree, I'm like, yeah, that's not okay. You don't go stand and stare at. And he had written about me several times on his blog. Anyway, so I was pretty intimidated by him, but I hadn't really told a lot of people. Claire was like, we heard about this. We want you to try to get him arrested. I didn't think that was an arrestable offense, but she was insinuating that I would be doing this for the good of the community and all these. And so there was some coercion going on.
Because he blogs negatively about NXIVM?
He did, yeah.
That's why. Okay, so they want to shut him down.
Right, exactly. So, so I did, drop off the paperwork to the county clerk. Why are you dropping this off here instead of calling the police? And I was trying to remember what they told me to say, because the police aren't going to do anything about it, essentially. And so they said, well, you have to put that in here. Take it back to Claire's attorneys, get them to rewrite it. And then I delayed once they rewrote it. I decided at that point I was too terrified, worried that he would somehow find out I was trying to get him arrested, find me, and try to, hurt me. Like extremely paranoid. Every time I went out my door, I had looked around to see if he was there. And my life just went downhill. My mental health went downhill from there. So I decided to flee. So I started making plans to leave and go to California. And I was, married at the time, and I, got my wife.
To someone in NXIVM?
Well, I brought them into NXIVM, but yeah, wife at the time. Yeah, I enrolled a few people, so I've had some talks with most of them, And
good for you.
Yeah, said I'm sorry for anything that may have occurred. But anyway, my wife and I basically made plans to go to California, and so the day, either the day before or the day of leaving for California, I dropped those papers off finally, and then left out of there. I still stayed involved in California, but prior to me leaving California, I got a phone call from one of the main leaders, which I'm not going to say his name at this point.
Okay, no problem.
And he said to me, I don't want you to work at the center in NXIVM as a coach because you're still overweight and you obviously haven't been working the program. And I was like, what? I was so thrown off.
He wanted people to be deathly skinny, right?
Yeah, Keith did, yeah.
It's a fetish, not a health thing.
It's weird. The person was saying, Keith, it was, especially in LA, if there's someone there that was overweight, it would kind of be counterproductive to the program because they were, they just wanted skinny, beautiful people there,
And so, because of all the actors.
Yeah, and so I was heartbroken. So I was doing work with more distant work while I was here in California, but I'm coming to the point of this story. So I was working with my coach, whom I loved a lot. So my coach was trying to work with me on weight stuff. At the time in NXIVM, they interjected the concept of penance right as I moved. Like if you fail to honor your word, you had to come up with a penance, and they had to approve the penance. So whatever it was, they had to approve it, So I must have tried, I don't know, 8 different penances before my penance was finally approved. So the one that they finally agreed to was that I had to, if I went over on my calories at all, or if I failed to check in each day with whatever I agreed to do, then I would drop my calories by 100 calories. My calories I was already eating was 900 a day. I went even to 901 calories. The next day I was only supposed to eat or consume 800 calories. It was really, really drawn out. So I would do this up to 3 days in a row. I would drop by 100 up to 3 days in a row if I continued to, because once you go to 800 or 700, it's super easy to go over your calories, I would have to drop it again. And at some point I was down to 400 calories. Yeah. So I started to become less than truthful about it. And I think that was the time when I realized that this is not sustainable for me, to, report, false weights and false recounts, when necessary as a way to survive,
Let me ask, this is part of the curriculum to becoming the best possible you, right? What they claim.
Keith Raniere claimed that you can work any program you want. The phrase he used a lot was, all roads lead to Rome. And so therefore everyone else used that phrase too. All roads lead to Rome. So people would, start off on one type of business or one type of goal, and then end up working somehow their way or exercise or some physical attribute,
So your one goal would be starting a business?
Yeah, running a multi-million-dollar web consulting firm. And I tried to persist that being my goal for a long time until I got that phone call, essentially. And so then I was like, well, I guess I got to change my goals, But yeah, that was my goal. Now, I did actually lose quite a bit of weight, and I'm not saying that this is a great thing and I'm not recommending it. It worked really well. I had a personal trainer, and I paid for a personal trainer to teach me how to do proper nutrition and proper exercise. But I was like, yeah, my calorie restriction today is 700. And my trainer was like, I don't understand, but okay, let's build a based on 700 then,
I just don't understand how they can work that in.
With the training that states that like all roads lead to Rome, that kind of thing, or it's really just kind of blithely stating like it's no big deal, And then with the counter statements of, well, if you're not ready to do this, or you don't want to do this, or there's some resistance, and obviously you don't care enough. You don't really care about yourself. You're like, and what couldn't have been learned through continuing my business goal, I don't know. But he would say that, using weight loss and body conditioning is a faster way to grow. Now, I'm here to tell you all that is complete BS. That's not true. The way to grow is to love yourself, and that is it. And if you love yourself fully, you're not going to be doing crazy things, including starvation diets, right? So they said I can't work in the community. So I moved to California and, a quote real job, if you will. And so it's so weird going into the quote real world after being part of this, because sometimes I would say stuff that I had been totally understood inside the cult, and it was just a language they spoke, and people would just say English. I don't understand. My first job outside of the cult, actually, because of all of the feedback that had been given, there were, if my boss was like, Tabitha, come to my office, I immediately had a very negative response. Immediately I was like, shaking and having a whole panic attack by the time I got
oh my God.
Telling my boss at the time that triggered me, and it was very harmful to me to have to deal with that. And I even suggested that he say it a different way, like, Tabby, I'd like to talk to you about ice cream sandwiches. Can you come down? He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Randomly intercom me and asked me to come to his office. And I swear, not long after that, I left that job because that was not funny. I was still part of like the behind the scenes planning, and I was still trying to get the nest group running here in Orange County a weekend. But then when I finally left, essentially what happened was I got the gymnast group up and running, and I mean, not the group, but the weekend. And then at that weekend, it was at Allison Mack's mom's house, and it was ran by Esther. And so Allison and Esther just both took turns berating me, like in front of all the other women there. They were just, why are you doing this? And just, I don't know, just totally shaming me and yelling at me essentially in front of all these women. And I just broke. That was my final thing, because I'm the one that organized that weekend, like that. All those women were there. They were all there because I organized the weekend, and I was the target. And I had never seen that happen to anybody before at a gymnast weekend. So I was like, what is happening, And, looking back on it, they probably did want me to quit,
Excommunication.
I started, again, making a quiet withdrawal. I stayed quiet the whole time up until, even a year after NXIVM came out as a cult. At the time, they weren't doing any of the DOS stuff, so there was no weird things. It might have been 2013 or 2014 that I was brushed, but I was in for about 7 years in total. Still maintained some of my clients in terms of web hosting and stuff. Once Keith got arrested and once Allison got arrested, then I was like, you know what, I got to cut ties completely. I had one client who I know didn't mean any harm. I need to go and delete all of my emails. I'm not deleting a single email,
Incredible.
That's not going to happen. And so I started getting rid of any client that was related to NXIVM and stuff like that. But yeah, it's certainly been an interesting journey. I have an above average IQ. I even got tested 2015. Later, it was really hard for me to not feel like this, the stupidest person in the world. Like, I felt so duped, and I felt, remembering Allison saying, some people are calling it a cult.
That moment when you said it, what's interesting about that, and she says, go ahead and Google it for yourself. It's very tricky with that. You do your research, pretend, because you can't find much. So it's like a very clever trick to disarm you. How long did you drag your tail after you left? For me, it was a long, long time.
After I left, it was after the 2017 article where I felt like I was totally duped. I actually had a whole mental health crisis. It was a really long journey for me. I had 3 different therapists at once to work on different issues, but one was a programmer, one was a cult specialist, and one was just a regular, everyday therapist. So try to help me with my regular everyday stuff of being a single mom of twin special needs kids and things like that.
I'm a twin.
Oh, you are? How cool. Fraternal twin boys, and they're both the autism spectrum, and that has a lot of my NXIVM story as well that I didn't get to, but people had been telling me all the time that I shouldn't have kids because I'm fat. So, very occasionally I'll have are they right? Are they autistic because of me? But of course I'm in the field of psychology now, and I'm like, that's not true. Stop it.
It's like you were hit with this weight limit so much, you're starting to believe. People like Babe Ruth did okay. It's a vanity thing coming from NXIVM, it sounds like. A vanity thing.
I went and got that psychology degree because I was like, I really wanted to help people. That was one of the main reasons why I decided to stay involved in NXIVM. I really wanted to change the world, if you will. My thinking was, they taught me how to do it incorrectly. Their goal was to make money for themselves and to brainwash people, essentially. So I went and got a degree in psychology, a master's degree, and became a marriage and family therapist so that I could learn the correct way. And along the way is where I picked up the, love yourself is the most powerful thing you can do. And also, I plug my favorite author, Anita Moorjani. She's been life-changing for me. I read her Dying to Be Me book. It is just super, it really resonated with me, which is like, love yourself. And ultimately, that is what we all can do. Again, by loving yourself, you can have all these fail-safes in so you don't mistreat yourself.
That's a powerful comment to me as a survivor. Love yourself. Mm-hmm. It sounds so simple and straightforward. We were discouraged from doing so. Even taking self-care was like you're taking time from the master. Mm-hmm. You need to be studying or doing this for the temple or whatever. It's this guilt, and it can be pretty difficult to deal with. So I think that it's not a small message, love yourself, because it can be hard after a cult divisively turns you against you. It's like, how did they make us hate ourselves? Mm-hmm. Hey, excuse me, you're great, you're amazing, lift yourself up, stop being so hard on yourself, type of thing.
For people who coming out of cults, it's obviously not something that you can just turn over overnight and be like, okay, I love myself now. What is the most loving thing for me to do right now? Even if you can't say, how can I love myself the best today? We can say, what is the most loving thing to do? Translate over into how can I love myself the best? Because that's one small step where it's not directly focused on ourselves, because by the time we realize we were in a cult, we get out of it, we don't love ourselves. Ourselves are our biggest enemies,
How could I be so stupid?
Right, it's a trust. It becomes a self-trust issue, and you have to really get through that and start trusting yourself again.
And in your story, it's like, well, you weren't stupid. You were told this was to begin with. You were told by Allison Mack, an important person in this world that I would be intimidated by too. Hollywood star, for real. You have to go through this training to keep your job. I don't think I've ever heard that recruitment technique, personally.
Right. Yeah,
that's hardcore. It's like, wait, are you going to double my pay so I could do this?
Cool. Well, if anyone does want to reach out, tabbychapman@gmail.com is my email. So I'm happy to, answer any questions. Oh, Twitter is Tabby Marie.
So Tabby, you were a wonderful guest. Thank you so much. Go to the website, internationalcultawareness.org. And thank you so much, Tabby, for being our guest. You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com. If you're feeling down and no one's there to actually talk to, there is someone to talk to. Call the Suicide Prevention Hotline anytime. This will pass. Please know that many of us have survived these thoughts. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255 anytime, day or night. There's a friendly person there that can remind you to value the life you have, and that this too shall pass. Again, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255, or search online, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You're listening to The Frankie Files, FrankieFilesPodcast.com.